Frank Fritz wasn't just a collector. He was also a storyteller, a treasure hunter, and a personality that millions of people came to love. But behind the laughter and the antiques, there was a deeper story with triumphs, struggles, and an unexpected ending. Join us as we talk about what they found in Frank Fritz's estate that will leave you speechless. While he was a collector from the start, the shocking news of his death shocked fans and collectors alike. From a kid from a small town who loved collecting things to a famous TV personality, Frank Fritz's journey was full of passion, determination, and unexpected turns. But to really understand his story, we have to go back to where it all began, his early life. Frank Fritz was born on October 11, 1963, in Davenport, Iowa. He has always been interested in things that had a story behind them. While most kids were playing sports or playing with toys, Frank was already looking for hidden treasures and collecting anything he could get his hands on. When other people saw junk, Frank saw history. Imagine being a kid and walking into an antique shop full of dusty shelves, old clocks ticking, and faded photos staring back at you. That's the world Frank fell in love with. He wasn't just interested in owning things. He wanted to know their history. Who used this old pocket watch? Where did this rusty sign used to hang? These were the kinds of questions that filled his mind as Frank grew older. He moved on from small collectibles to bigger treasures like motorcycles, dirt bikes, and rare memorabilia. He spent hours at flea markets and garage sales, always looking for the next great find. Some people might have thought he was just a kid with a weird hobby, but for Frank, it was a passion and a way of life. But here's the catch. He didn't immediately become an antiques dealer as a career. After high school, he worked as a firefighter for almost 25 years. Frank was a fire inspector in Iowa. It was a serious job that required attention to detail and a dedication to public safety. Even though he was busy making sure buildings were up to code, his love for collecting never went away. In fact, as a fire inspector, Frank got to visit old buildings like firehouses and warehouses that were full of forgotten treasures. He started collecting firehouse memorabilia like helmets, extinguishers, antique fire alarms, and anything else that had to do with history. Little did he know that this side hobby would become a big part of his life. Frank realized that his collectibles were more than just personal treasures. They had real value. He started buying and selling things, turning his hobby into a profitable side business. What if he could do this full-time? What if he could spend his days looking for lost artifacts and bringing them back to life? It wasn't easy for Frank to quit his stable job, but he did it anyway. He opened his own antique shop called Frank's Finds and focused on It started with a small step, selling firemen's gear and other interesting items. This small step set the stage for something much bigger, the rise of a picker's journey. Frank may have become the most famous person in the world of picking, but his story wasn't just about antiques. It was about love, friendship, and eventually a painful breakup. He was the guy with the scruffy beard and the knack for finding hidden treasures in dusty barns and forgotten garages. His charm, humor, and expertise made him a fan favorite. While things seemed to go smoothly behind the scenes, things weren't always what they seemed. Before American Pickers became a reality TV hit, Frank Fritz was just another guy who liked collecting things. His co-star, Mike Wolfe, shared the same interest. The two met in middle school in Bondorf, Iowa, and while they weren't exactly best friends as kids, their love of finding and collecting rare items brought them together. Mike was the one with the big dreams. He wanted to make picking into more than just a hobby, so he started filming himself on picking trips, recording his finds, and pitching the idea to networks. Frank, on the other hand, was running his antique shop and was happy selling his finds. It took some persuasion, but Frank finally agreed to join Mike on his adventures. Little did they know that their road trips would become a huge hit when American Pickers premiered on the History Channel in 2010 and quickly became a favorite among viewers. Mike and Frank traveled across the U.S. looking for valuable antiques, rare collectibles, and hidden treasures. They didn't just buy and sell things, they also told the stories behind them, explaining their historical significance and why they were important. This is where Frank's charm really shone. While Mike was usually the business-minded, fast-talking negotiator, Frank was the one who connected with people. He could make homeowners feel comfortable joking around with them. He was the one who could turn a tense situation into a hilarious conversation. He wasn't just buying old gas station signs or rusty motorcycles. He was building relationships. It wasn't just his humor that won people over. It was his sincerity. Frank never seemed like he was just doing his job. Whether he was sorting through junk or getting excited over an old oil can, his excitement was real. And that's why his fans connected with him. Millions of people watched American Pickers for over a decade to see Frank and Mike drive across the country in their van looking for rusty gold. Mike was the leader, Frank was the able sidekick, and Danielle Colby ran the office and made sure everything ran smoothly. It was a team effort, but things weren't always as perfect as they seemed on TV. In 2020, fans started to notice that Frank wasn't in as many episodes. At first, there wasn't much of an explanation, but then it came out that Frank had taken time off due to he had health problems, including major back surgery that left him with 185 stitches and 2 rods in his spine. He also had personal problems, such as addiction problems. For a while, it looked like he might come back to the show, but that never happened. In 2021, Mike announced that Frank was no longer a part of American Pickers. The announcement wasn't exactly full of warmth and friendship. When Mike Wolf talked about Frank's departure, he put out a statement saying he would miss Frank, and people loved the show because of Frank's funny one-liners and ability to turn a boring pick into a fun adventure. Even after he left, his fans continued to support him, and many hoped that he would come back or at least make peace with Mike. Unfortunately, that never happened. Frank may have left American Pickers, but his presence in the world of picking will never be forgotten. He showed that passion and personality can turn a simple hobby into something amazing. Whether he was uncovering a rare sign in a barn or laughing over an old motorcycle, he brought something unique to the show. Building a business empire beyond picking, a lot of people don't know how much Frank Fritz accomplished in the world of antiques. Besides his time on American Pickers, he wasn't just a reality TV star. He was also a businessman, a collector, and an expert in his field. His love for finding hidden treasures didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling. It was his life. Collectors weren't just going to stores to look for treasures anymore. They were looking for them online too. To stay ahead, he took his business online and started selling collectibles to people all over the world. His presence on social media and online marketplaces helped him reach a much larger audience than ever before. Anyone who watched American Pickers knew that Frank had a deep love for motorcycles. It wasn't just a hobby. It was something he had been doing for a long time. People who were interested in motorcycles could learn from someone who had been picking them up for decades. Frank didn't just become famous for antiques, he also made a name for himself. To give back to the business that had helped shape his life over the years, he worked with other experts to put on antique fairs and shows that brought together collectors, traders, and fans. He loved sharing his love of the subject with others. Frank stood out not only because he knew a lot about antiques, but also because he could make them interesting. He did this through live events talks and co-authoring the book, American Picker's Guide to Picking, which gave readers an inside look at the show and the art of picking. Frank was honest about his struggles and said that he had lost 65 pounds by following a strict diet to control his symptoms. But having Crohn's isn't just a physical battle. It's also an emotional one. Imagine never knowing when a flare-up would happen, not being able to eat what you want, and always being tired. Despite all of this, Frank kept going, and dances and more. Should make life easier, right? As American Pickers became more popular, Frank's life changed quickly. He was no longer just a guy who liked antiques. He was a celebrity. Everyone knew him, watched his every move, and expected him to be the funny, charismatic picker they saw on TV. But But behind that smile, Frank was dealing with anxiety. In a rare moment of honesty, he admitted that fame wasn't always easy and that the constant attention made him anxious, just like many other celebrities. He later said that he didn't even like drinking anymore. He just wanted to break the cycle and get healthy. In July 2022, Frank Fritz had a massive stroke at his home in Davenport, Iowa. He was found unresponsive and was rushed to the hospital, where fans held their breath for weeks, hoping he would make it. After almost a month in the hospital, doctors sent him to a rehabilitation center, where he began the slow and painful process of recovery. But this wasn't just any medical setback, eh? A stroke can change everything in an instant. It can take away your ability to walk, talk, or even think clearly. For Frank, who had already been through a lifetime of struggles with Crohn's disease and addiction, this was yet another mountain to climb. The stroke left him unable to care for himself, so a court had to appoint a guardian to oversee his daily life while a bank took over his finances. Suddenly, the man who used to drive around America's back roads, negotiating deals with a twinkle in his eye, was struggling just to do the basic tasks. His medical bills went through the roof. Reports said his care cost $29,000 a month, which was an unbelievable amount that showed how much his condition had taken away from him. As we've already said, Frank's relationship with American Pickers co-star Mike Wolfe had been tense for years. But after the stroke, all the old grudges didn't matter anymore. Mike reached out and visited Frank while he was recovering to check in on his old friend. He didn't just see Frank as the co-star he had. Mike later admitted that he and Frank had talked many times before Frank's death. They had laughed, shared memories, and talked about the past. There was no longer any anger or resentment. It was just two old friends finding their way back to each other. By September 2024, Frank's health had gotten worse. His body, already weak from years of illness and struggle, could no longer fight back. The end was near when the call came that Frank didn't have much time left. Fans and collectors can't imagine Frank's prized bikes going on sale. These weren't just machines, they were a part of him. They were the bikes he had traveled across the country to find, spent years restoring, and that represented his greatest passion, picking. However, if sources are to be believed, an auction is already planned to sell off his whole collection, including every bike, vintage sign, and carefully kept piece of. The biggest surprise is that the money won't be going to a private estate or business fund. Instead, it will be given to charity. This is the last act of kindness from a man who spent his whole life researching, preserving, and sharing history. Tucker Carlson looked shocked and said, "This man was just here, and now his legacy is being spread across the world piece by piece, like a final chapter he never got to write himself." If you could own any vintage bike from his collection, which one would you pick and why? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to see more, subscribe to our feed.